Assalamualaikum. My name is Hafsa Yasin, and today we are here with our other lecture of comparative politics. This is lecture 6 of our series. So, next is mass democracies. That states are usually built on the basis of mass democracies, or we can say this is the concept of equalization. The nation state is now the property of its citizens, and it was elites, not masses, who originally created and rules it. Like usually, the state is created by the people or with the collective effort of the people. But now it is ruled by the elites of the state. So, like, it is not the property of the masses anymore. In fact, it is the property of citizens, elites now. The third phase, the masses conquered the right to participate in the governmental decision making, and hence democratic states or democracies were created. Like while the nation states were created, they were the property of nations, they were the property of the citizen, and ultimately it became the property of the elites, like the capitalist. But later on, the masses has somehow conquered it to the way that they have generated their own right to participate in the governmental decision making. So this particular process of participation of masses or the general public into the decisions of the government is uh, known as basically democracy. Like democracy means government of the people, for the people, and by the people. So ultimately, in this process, people has developed their own, we can say, right to participate in the governmental decision, while the ruling party of the state is still the elite party or the capitalist party. Then political parties were founded to link citizens with elites in assemblies and parliament. Like later on, the political parties were formulated, and in those political parties, there were many of the local workers, and all of those local workers, or we can say all of like general people, all of these general public was basically participating in the whole lawmaking process. They were the members of assemblies, and they were the members of the parliament, and if it, in fact they are the members of assemblies like national assembly or provincial assemblies, and they are the member of parliaments or senate. So ultimately, uh, now these people or these common people are working along with the elites or the capitalist class of the country. Like the ruling class is still the capitalist class, but now somehow citizens are involving in their decision making process. Then there is institutionalization of opposition party. Gradually, these political systems accepted the idea that peaceful opposition to the government was legitimate, and even the idea of peaceful change of group or party in government. Like uh, then there was introduced a opposition party or the opposition forum in the assembly, where the if one party is ruling, the opposition party will be there on the assembly floors, and they will be there to highlight the mistakes done by the ruling government, or to highlight the wrong policies which are formulated or implemented by the ruling government. So this was the kind of idea that was a sort of we can say revolution, uh, where the peaceful opposition was have to perform its role, and they have the legitimate right to to do opposition in the assemblies, and even if someone is not happy with its political party, or someone is not adjusting in his or her political party or political group, they can peacefully change their political party or their political group. Then there is the welfare state, or we can say redistribution. The welfare state, democracies that accept responsibility for the well-being of their citizens, particularly by redistributing resources and providing services for the young, old, sick, disabled, and employed. Like the state which basically claim that they are working for the welfare of the general public or the welfare of its citizens, and uh, they basically of course a state is not based on one part. It is usually based on different countries or based on different provinces or based on different states. So what basically state do? State basically provides services to all of the states or the provinces equally, and it to redistribute, of course. Firstly, state collect the resources from all the parts of the country, and further it redistribute the resources equally between young, old, sick, disabled, and unemployed people. The last phase in the development of the territorial state is the explicit endorsement of policies to strengthen economic solidarity between different parts of the population. Like ultimately, firstly, there was no role of policies at all. The elite class were responsible to make any kind of policy, and ultimately that policy was implemented. Now, and the policies are formulated to basically explicit explicit endorsement of policies. Like ultimately a state is a territorial state, and it basically formulate policy to strengthen its economy, to uh, provide services to the people, to maintain law and order in the state, and to maintain infrastructure or to build infrastructure in the state, in the different parts of the country or in the population. So the idea of policies was generated where the local sorry where the common representative, or where the representative from the general public in the National Assembly floor or in the Parliament were responsible to formulate the policy, and they were responsible to make it in best favor uh, of that country, or in that for that state. So public welfare services were created to support the young and old, sick and disabled, and the unemployed and poor. Whenever you are living in a welfare state is bound to provide services uh, to the young, old, sick and disabled, to unemployed and poor. Like we can say America is somehow a welfare state, where if someone is poor, they basically provide them uh, some sort of money, or we can say uh, sort of grant. Or same as with the unemployed. If someone is unemployed, he get the unemployed fund from the government. If someone is sick, then government funds him for with his health and services, health thing, like the government hospital bills and all. And if someone is disabled and he can do anything, then the government like welfare state is bound to provide some sort of fund to that person. Then progressive taxation and state contribution facilitate the transfer of resources from the wealthier to the less fortunate parts of the population. Like the progressive system was introduced in taxation system, the tax is implemented on the people in the form where the like rich pay more tax and the poor pay less tax, and ultimately this is considered as a state distribution, and to facilitate the transfer of resources, where of course the tax of course when the tax is collected more from the wealthier and less from the fortunate, like we can say the one who has the less pay and uh, less fortunate parts of the population. So ultimately this is how a tax is paid. Then welfare states are characterized by the redistribution and equality of the opportunity. These are the states, welfare states are the states which have some sort of characteristics like that. They believe on the formula of redistribution. What does redistribution means? That the wealth is collected from the uh, wealthy people or from the rich people, and it is redistributed to the less fortunate or to the poor people. And then there is equality of opportunity. Of course, if there are some job opportunities, they are provided on the basis of equality, and they were created particularly in northwestern Europe. As the second world war ended, then the state basically have adopted this formula of welfare state to make the states work in a proper or in a right way. Then we will move towards the theoretical approaches to the state. Theoretical approaches to the state and its origin, which is surpassed only by the number of different states in the world. Four of the most common approaches are constitutional approach, ethical and moral approach, conflict approach, and pluralistic approach. These are the approaches on the basis of which a state basically run, or we can say that is supposed to be the origin of the state, or it basically express that how a state is working and all that. Today we will only study about the constitutional approach. So according to theories, the state is established by some agreement or social contract between citizens and rulers that defines the major function and task of the state and power of its rulers. Like there is a written form of contract. uh, while you are the citizen of a state, you have to accept that constitution or that written document as the rule of law. And while you are living in a state, you have to follow that rule of law and the functions which are mentioned in that rule book. And even in that rule book, the powers of the rulers or the authority of the rulers is already defined in that book, and the citizens of the state has to accept that authority and power to maintain the situation of law and order in the state. So this rule book, this paper, or we can say this contract between the state and the citizen, is known as constitution. So social contract theorists know very well that there never was an actual contract of this kind, but they conduct a sort of mental experiment in order to understand what sort of agreements between citizens and rulers are necessary to establish an order and stable state. Basically, in before this, there was no contract or there was no constitution at all. Social contract theorists basically introduced this concept where they have agreed that a state can't work without some rule of law or without any rules and regulations which will define the authority or power of the citizens, and which will define the authority or power of the rulers. So by this thing, ultimately the state run in a ordered or in a stable way. So the main concern of these theories is the question of how the legitimacy of the state is established. Like these are the approaches which basically define the legal status of the state. These are the approaches which basically define that on what legal laws or legal boundaries a state basically run. Of course, if someone will be given power, more than a defined power, then the formula of that or we can say that that particular quote would be applied here, that power corrupts and absolute power all absolutely corrupt. Like when there will be more power, it would create corruption, and when there will be an absolute power, then it will absolutely create some sort of corruption. So the constitutional approach define the boundaries or the limits of citizens as well as rulers living in the state, and it helps to maintain the law and order in the state as well. Thank you so much. This is it for today. Hope to see you in the next lecture, and if you have any queries you can definitely ask. Thank you.